Good morning, Robin. And we are about to witness the biggest showdown yet between the president and this new Congress. Republicans are denouncing his budget as DOA, debt on arrival.
The national debt is getting closer and closer to the tipping point when we owe more than the entire value of everything made in this country for a whole year.
We're broke.
Our problem is we are running out of road to keep kicking this can down.
America is more than $14 trillion in the red, with both parties vowing to fix it.
We can get this deficit under control. It is not impossible. And if we do so, we will have put the country on a better path.
So how much is $14 trillion? Well, if you stacked 14 trillion $1 bills on top of each other, they'd reach all the way to the moon almost 4 times. Put another way, the amount we owe would be enough to buy every American worker 3 years of paid vacation. And it's only getting worse. This year is on track for another record deficit. Under the president's proposed plan, the national debt will keep rising for another 10 years and beyond. Not a balanced budget in sight.
The president's budget is the clearest sign yet that he simply does not take our fiscal problems seriously.
The president's plan does cut spending for hundreds of programs, but that does little to stop the flow of red ink. And each pinprick to the deficit means real-world pain to many workers and families. For example, the president's proposed cuts to heating subsidies for the poor. A move that in the middle of a winter that's been tough for most of the country could leave more than 3 million poor families out in the cold.
The Republicans haven't come out with their budget for next year yet, but so far, George, nothing they have proposed, none of their cuts, get us anywhere near a balanced budget either.
Okay, John, thanks very much. And for more on this, let's turn right away to the Republican chairman of the House Budget Committee, Paul Ryan of Wisconsin. Thanks for coming in this morning. Congressman, you just heard Jonathan Karl right there. That is the White House line as well. They say you've come up with some spending cuts, some specific spending cuts, but you do not have a deficit reduction plan. Will you commit to coming up with a plan that reduces the deficit by more than the president?
Of course we will. That's not easy to accomplish, George, because the president punted on the budget. Look, I'm very disappointed. I was actually hoping for some sincere presidential leadership. The biggest threat to our country and our economy is our debt. And yet the president has given us a budget that adds $13 trillion to the debt. He doubles the debt in 5 years after taking office and then triples it in 10 years. So yes, we will, when we bring our budget to the floor, bring a budget that is far more in deficit reduction and debt reduction.
How are you going to do that, Congressman? I take you at your word, but it's going to be something to see because you've all ruled out any tax increases, revenue increases of any kind. That means you're going to have to come up with another $1.6 trillion more in savings than the president just to get to even. That means hitting Medicare, hitting Medicaid, hitting Social Security, doesn't it?
So the drivers of our debt are in entitlement programs. You have to do entitlement reform if you're serious about this budget, if you're serious about this debt. And the point I keep making about entitlement reform, the sooner we tackle it, the better off everybody is. Because the kinds of reforms that we've advocated in the past tell current seniors, people in and near retirement, that they're exempt from changes, but we prospectively make these changes for younger generations.
That you have advocated
we won't be able to keep doing
that. Not your fellow conference members. Are you saying you're going to be able to get the Republicans in the House to agree on a budget that takes a bite out of Medicare, takes a bite out of Social Security, takes a bite out of those entitlements?
So we haven't, as you know this process up here, we don't do our budget until April. That's the way the 74 Budget Act works. So we will be writing our budget once we get our yardstick or our baseline from CBO. And then we're going to be, if we ignore the drivers of our debt, which are these entitlement programs, then we're no better than the president, and we're not leading. He is not leading. It's very clear. You know, editorial boards from across the country are saying that he whiffed, that he punted. I wish it weren't so. Presidents are elected to lead, to propose fixes to the country's biggest challenges. But if he's not going to do that, yes, we intend on giving the country a choice and showing the country how we want to get our fiscal situation under control. Because if we don't get this debt under control, it's going to tank our economy, and it's going to give our kids a diminished future.
So we're going to be watching for that. Meantime, another important deadline is looming in just a couple of weeks away, 2.5 weeks away, March 4th. The government runs out of money. You all are going to try to pass your plan to keep the government going with some significant cuts this week in the House. But it's not going to get through the Senate. To avoid a government shutdown, will you agree to keep the government running at current levels beyond March 4th?
So we obviously don't want to see a shutdown occur. But at the same time, George, we don't want to rubber stamp these extremely high and elevated spending levels. So we want to see government continue. We don't want to see a shutdown, but we don't want to rubber stamp these inflated levels of spending. So that means we're going to have to negotiate some short-term extensions while we get to the long-term fix. We have 7 months left in the fiscal year. We don't want to accept the fact that the president increased domestic spending by 84% over the last 2 years when you count the stimulus, 24% in the base budget. That's too much. We want to bring that spending back to 2008 levels. And if we don't get agreement in the meantime, yes, we do think there's going to be some kind of a situation where we have a short-term CR, but we don't want those short-term CRs to be done in such a way that they rubber stamp these extremely high and elevated spending levels.
So let me just be clear, because we only have a few seconds left. So you're saying for any short-term extension, that's going to have to be at reduced levels to what the government is running at right now.
I think we're going to have to negotiate. I think we're going to have to negotiate exactly how those short-term CRs occur.
Okay, Congressman Ryan, thanks very much.